Namaste everybody, Suprabhatam. Very happy to be here. This is the first time I'm at the Bangalore Literature Festival. And what could have been a better start than having a conversation with Ram Madhav ji. So today we are going to discuss a very, very interesting and important book of his. This is the book, The Hindutva Paradigm. Now, I'm sure a lot of you must be thinking, "Arey, Hindutva pe likha hai." Because even when I was carrying the book, I was just hoping nobody calls me out on the flight to say, "Arey, baapre, terrorist aa gayi," or something like that, you know. So it's so weird, because the word Hindutva has been described since ages. We have Hindutva of Savarkar, we have Hindutva of Sangh, we have Hinduism, and we have this whole dismantling Hindutva. Of all things, in US, they want to dismantle Hindutva. Then we have our own politicians say, Hinduism chalega, but not Hindutva. And still, sir, you chose this name for the book. What is this Hindutva? I know this has been explained time and again, but I think it is an important word whose definition we all need to agree on. So, would you please explain that?
You know, firstly, that experience that you talked about, that people looking at you as though they are seeing a terrorist, is an experience of the past. Things have changed in the country. There are many people who understand what Hindutva meant or what it means to us today. Yes, there was a time when it was difficult to understand, but also easy to misunderstand. The tragedy with Hindutva has been that it was a bit difficult idea to probably understand for various reasons, because a lot of misinformation was going around. People were talking about many things which were not truly the representation of that idea, and also sometimes the articulation from the Hindutva side. That also gave scope for a number of misunderstandings. But I think over the last few decades, people have seen it from close quarters, understood it, that it is not, I deliberately used that word idea. I did not use the word ideology. Ideologies are generally closed frame of thoughts. They're closed. And you have to be either with it or you are against it. That's what is ideology. We do not want to place Hindutva in that framework of an ideology, although, of course, for want of any better word, even in our own discourse, we use the word ideology. But that's why I chose to use the word paradigm. Paradigm is basically a worldview, a broad set of ideas that come to be identified as Hindutva. People seek to make distinction between Hindutva, Hinduism, Hinduness. How do we explain this? Hinduism in action. How do you call it? What do you call it? Hinduism in practice. We say Hinduism in practice is Hindutva. It's a very Indian word, twa, representing not an ideology, but a way of living, way of life, you call it. So this whole ill-informed discourse about whether Hindutva, Hinduism, everything is one and the same, are two distinct things. To us, we strongly believe that they are not two different things. Hinduism, as a great philosophy, converted into a way of life, is what Hindutva is all about, and may go one step forward and say, should be all about. Why I'm saying should be is, even assuming that somebody who is thinking that he is a Hindutva-wadi, going against those core principles, then he cannot claim himself to be a Hindutva-wadi. You cannot have anything, any belief that is different from what core Hindu belief system has propagated or upheld for millennia in this country. So that is why it's more like an idea or a set of ideas, which is very ancient, very, very quintessentially our own Indian. I don't want to take too much of your time, but just to broadly say, right from the way you look at the God, to creation, to universe, to nature, to fellow human beings, to society, to your own self. This spectrum, if you take, we as a very ancient peoples have developed a distinct view about everything. The way we look at the divinity is not how probably others look at it. The way we look at nature, others don't look at it. The way we look at interpersonal relationships, the way we look at the whole edifice of society to be based on one institution called family, not everybody would look at it. So we developed a very distinct view that includes how you look at different thought processes, different religions. And we talked about everything that is relevant for the mankind from a very evolved philosophical point of view. That is what we generally call as Hinduism. Put it into action should be Hindutva. I would probably try to define it in those simple terms. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ram Madhavji. That was very nicely put and very briefly put. The book talks about integral humanism of Deen Dayal Upadhyay ji, who was one of the founding members of Bharatiya Jansangh. Bharatiya Jansangh, as a lot of you might know, is the previous avatar of Bharatiya Janata Party. So that was Jansangh in the 1950s and the 60s. And Deen Dayal Upadhyay ji was one of the founding members of it. And in 1965, he had given 4 lectures where he had explained the Indic worldview. So usually we talk about capitalism and socialism and communism, all the isms. He said, what is the Indian way of looking at some of these? What is the Indian way of looking at the world and at ourselves? And from that, he propounded what is called the integral humanism, which, Ram Madhavji, you've called the Hindutva worldview as well. So can you in brief tell us what this integral humanism is? And I think that will also help people to understand that when we talk about the principles of Hindutva, believing the Hindutva principle, what those are.
So, as you rightly mentioned, Deen Dayal Upadhyay was one of the founding ideologues of the Hindu nationalist political movement, which came to be known as Bharatiya Jansangh after independence. Later on, it became the BJP in 1980s. You first of all placed that whole discourse of integral humanism in that time frame. We just got independence. Not just we. May I tell you that between 1940, you would say 45 and 65, close to 60 countries in the world came out of the colonial rule or colonial oppression. So there was a huge debate over how to chart their own national course for future, for development. Each country was looking at it. Some countries thought they should simply imitate the Western capitalist model, but for some others, there was this other option of a communist model being put forth by countries like Soviet Union. There was generally this debate over which path to take. In India, those days, Jawaharlal Nehru was our prime minister. He was greatly impressed by the communist ideas. I wouldn't say communist political system necessarily, because in 1936 itself, Nehru categorically says, I'm not with communist political system, which is dictatorial and which is oppressive. But he was enamored of the ideas like socialism, wealth distribution, things like that. So Nehru thought that for independent India, the best way would be something on the lines of communism, but not necessarily communism, so which he described as a socialist pattern of society. It's another matter. In his lifetime, Nehru never defined it. In fact, one occasion came when in Mussoorie, he went to deliver a talk. He spoke for about 45 minutes to 1 hour about his whole experience of the West and how he learnt about these great ideas from Keynes to all others. And at the end of it, one of those civil servants, upcoming civil servants asked him, sir, it's very, very interesting, but can you please define what do you mean by socialist pattern of society? We know about socialism. We know about society. What is that pattern in between? Amiya Rao, B.G. Rao wrote about it in their book 6,000 Days. They say, Nehru said, it's a very important question, very profound question, but what can I do? I have a little headache, I can't answer it today. We never answered it. We never said, what do we mean by it? But we tried to adopt something which is not necessarily very, 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 very natural to us. So around that time, Deendayal Upadhyaya, representing a different political ideology, propounded this idea that let us take this integral humanist thought. Again, I have a problem with that word ism. Again, isms are very strict frameworks of ideology. Communism, capitalism, socialism. Nowadays, we created something called humanism. What humanism? Human existence. So, integral humanist thought, in Hindi we call it as Ekatma Manav Darshan, can be the guiding light for our polity, our economy, our society, everything for us. Because India is not a new country to be born on 15th August 1947. It's an ancient nation, continuing to live as a nation for millennia. Through that millennia-old living, it has gathered lot of rich experiences. Based on those experiences, can we build our own model of national life? That was what integral humanist thought of Deendayal Upadhyaya was all about. Again, Deendayal himself says, I'm not giving any new theory, like Karl Marx gave a new theory of clash conflict. There were other theories, at that time are continued to be propagated today. But Deendayal said, I'm not giving any new theory. All that I'm saying is, those very profound, ancient ideas of this land can be interpreted to suit to our modern times. If I were to apply my wisdom, of age-old wisdom, for 1950 or 1960, how do we interpret it? In economics, how do I interpret it? In politics, how do I interpret it? Remember, this was not Deendayal ji alone who was doing it. Please go back and read Gandhi. Throughout his writings, he highlights this aspect. He talked about, in economics, he talked about trusteeship. Dharma kartrutva, a very Indian idea. So, Deendayal picked up all those gems of wisdom from our ancient and also contemporary scholars. He tried to interpret them in the context of the prevalent big ideas like socialism, capitalism, communism. He said, these are all Western ideas coming from outside. This is our Hindu or Indian, basically. He called basically integral humanist. He didn't give any particular nomenclature to it. This is our integral humanist idea, which has a different take on many of these issues. So, integral humanism is a very quintessentially Indian take on contemporary challenges of post-independence India. He articulated in the form of Ekatma Manava Darshana, a philosophy, a view, a worldview.
So could you give an example of it? Like when we say very Indian worldview, what could it mean?
So that's why, as I mentioned, first of all, take the case of economics. So Deendayal surveys this whole rise of a socialist model, communist model, and the capitalist model. And then he proposes that can we think in terms of our own economic model, where every person, every citizen is a stakeholder in nation building. You decentralize the whole edifice of our politics, our economy, everything. For example, Gandhi used to talk about Gram Swaraj. Deendayal explains what is Gram Swaraj in his economic idea. He says, can villages be given power to decide about the territory of their village? Like if that village has 5,000 hectares of land. The masters of that territory, can that be the villagers? Now, one may say, how is it possible? State owns it. I mean, today's system, state government or union government own the land. Territory is owned by them. But you are saying, give it to your villagers. I tell you, in states like Nagaland, which enjoy certain special provisions under Article 371 D or F, I don't remember exact subclause. Their territory belongs to village mukhya. And remember that village mukhya is not elected. Does it mean we are going against the constitution and unelected village mukhya having control over the territory also? Like, if the government wants to wants to find some oil reserves underneath this place. There is some gas or oil here. All the state government has to do is to notify that there's gas and oil here. It does not belong to Lalit Ashok because it is underneath the territory. The territory belongs to the state. See, gas and oil belongs to state. State can exploit it. Exploration can happen here. It cannot happen in Nagaland. There, it needs to have the permission of the village pramukh. And that village head is not elected. Is it a good model or not? No, it is an Indian model. Gandhi talked about it, and there was a lot of debate over it in our Constituent Assembly. Okay, majority did not agree with that proposal, so it was not incorporated in the original constitution. Finally, in 1993, Narasimha Rao government introduced that 73rd, 74th amendment to our constitution, making village self-governance as the model. But the trickery that happened in that was, through 73rd, 74th amendment, we gave an elected body to the villages. We gave money to the villages. We did not give powers. Powers are still with the state, represented by the DM, the collector, the district collector. And as a result, you know what happens? A collector has to implement 200, 300 schemes in each district. You will laugh at me if I say some collectors in some districts in the country, in some parts of the country, have to count goats every year. They have to keep the data of goats because there was a scheme for goats. That scheme was controlled by state government. So collector साहब का job है कि हर साल गिनती करो कितने goat बचे हैं. Is it the job of a collector? Why should state count it? Why can't a village count it? But we created a system. So Deen Dayal said, our economic model should be bottom up. He talked about temples. We see temples, I'm sorry I'm taking a little longer time, but let me finish in 1 minute. Temples we see as places of God, not in Hinduism, not in Indian idea. Because in Indian idea, God is everywhere. He is omnipresent. Sarva Vyapi hai. So why temple for him? Deen Dayal proposed that temples are actually community places based on our dharmic idea to undertake social, economic, and religious activity. It has to be also economic. What is economic in it? Temples should feed people. Where there is a temple, nobody should go hungry. Annam Bahu Kurvita is one of our major missions of a temple. When there is a temple, there should not be anybody going hungry. That's why that whole idea of prasada. It's another matter. Prasad के नाम पर थोड़ा वो दे देते, शक्कर दे देते आज के दिन में. Because temples cannot afford to give anything more. But temple is an economic, that's why Rajas Maharaj give a lot of land to temples so that they undertake the economic activity. They are supposed to spread education. Temples used to run educational institutions. Temples are supposed to make sure people live healthy lives. Hindu view of medicine is not disease management, it is healthy living. You have to teach people how to live healthy. That work has to be undertaken by temple. Governments need not create government hospital in every district. The pujari should know how people in the village should lead a healthy life. They used to do it. Elders would remember that if we have some problem in our stomach, we always never went to the doctor. We went to the pujari. He would give you some kashayam. You will be all right by morning. I'm saying generally, this is how we ran our society. That's the reason why we were never government-centric people. We were a people centered around basic institutions like village, like family. Our family concept is totally different. Our family is also as a family, as a human institution, it's also an economic institution. Meaning, in our family, if there is a widowed sister, if it is an old age parent, if there is an unemployed son, he is not the burden of the state, he is the burden of the family. That's why we save money. Today nobody saves, it's a different thing because we have credit cards. But Deen Dayal proposed that is how society should run. You can't put everything, every burden on the state. Can you develop that model? A model of economy that is from grassroots upwards, where state is one of the institutions, not the institution. Sorry, it's a big philosophy. I try to put it in simple terms. Thank you.
That was fantastic. Thank you so much. And I have so many questions, but I know all of you do, so I'll stick to what I wanted to ask, because I want to keep 10 minutes for Q&A later on. So jot your questions down. Sir, you discussed a very interesting concept of Rashtra. Rashtra versus the Western idea of nation states. And as you mentioned, these discussions happened immediately after independence. So we were also trying to understand, what does this India as a nation mean? Some people said we were always we were always one since ancient times. Others said, no, it is Britishers who made us Bharat, the country. There were some others who were trying to define what an Indian or a national identity is, and what contrast it with a cultural identity. But before I ask you to explain that, I want to read out something very interesting from the book itself, where the discussion is on cultural and national identity. And this is a piece from Jawaharlal Nehruji's speech made at AMU, Aligarh Muslim University. So he says, I have said that I am proud of our inheritance and our ancestors who gave an intellectual and cultural preeminence to India. How would you feel about that past? Do you feel you are also the sharers in it and inheritors of it? Then a lot of other things, but I'll skip ahead. I ask you these questions because in recent years, many forces have been at play, diverting people's mind into wrong channels, trying to pervert the course of this history. You are a Muslim and I am a Hindu. We may adhere to different religions, faiths, or even none. But that does not take away that cultural inheritance that is yours as well as mine. The past holds us together. Why should the present or the future divide us in spirit? This is coming from Jawaharlal Nehru. And what is very striking is that even today, our politicians are going back to the same discourse, dividing one versus the other, even when a simple thing is said like, our culture, our past is the same. Sir, so how do you define that Rashtra and the cultural national identity?
Rashtra is a very, very quintessentially Indian idea. Meaning, the basis of our unity in this country was never political. We had, right at the time of independence also, we had 565 different states in the country. So the basis of the unity was outside that statehood, outside that kings, monarchs, emperors and all. What was that unity? What was that Bharat that we are talking about some 500 years ago? Because if you see Indian literature, right, even going back to Vishnu Purana, which is ascribed to pre-Christian era, right from that time, the word Bharat comes. The word Rashtra, for denoting the people of one particular territory, comes in our ancient literature, even in Vedas. In fact, the Vedas, in one of the very first stanzas, they say the emergence of this Rashtra, basically this nation, is out of the benign wish of the saints. There was a benign wish, they called it Bhadra Ichcha. Then they explain what is that Bhadra Ichcha. Bhadra Ichcha talks about how they should live, how you should, I told you, from your birth to the whole creation and beyond the creation to the divine, how do you relate yourself to that is what is the philosophy that they propounded. Their Bhadra Ichcha was, I should create a community that follows this spirit. So that has been the basis of our unity. Politics did come. Today, one of the greatest institutions of our unity, our oneness, is our constitution. No denying the fact that constitution keeps us one. But constitution came in 1950 or 1949, 26th November. Are we not one people before that? What is that basis? And our constitution was amended 106 times until now. Still we are one people. Those 106 amendments need not be agreed to by everybody here. But we are one people. What is that oneness? That oneness is the sentiment, that feeling, the spirit, to borrow from Nehru. That spirit that originates from the feeling that we are an ancient people with an ancient philosophy. That is Rashtra. We are a unique nation which continued to be the Rashtra. We became a state. We created a citizenship. But citizenship, not citizenship, we remained a Rashtra for millennia. There existed such spirit-based nations or civilization-based nations in the past. Greeks were there. Romans were there. In fact, Muhammad Iqbal's that famous song, Sare Jahan se Acha Hindustan Hamara. In that he asked this very pertinent question, Yunan, Mishra, Roma, sab mit gaye jahan pe, kuch baat hai ki hasti mitti nahi hamari. There is something in this land, in this culture, in this civilization, that does not mitigate. Yunan has disappeared. Ancient Egypt has disappeared. The Egypt that you see is a very new, very different entity. Ancient Egypt you will see in movies like Troy. Or ancient Rome you will see in Hollywood movies today. You won't see it on the ground. But this country remained. Its civilizational continuum existed for millennia. That is the spirit which Nehru talked about. He asked that question not out of any antipathy for any community. He went to Aligarh Muslim University in 1949. After the partition, because the basis for partition was that no, we are not one people. We are two people because we profess two religions. Gandhi, Nehru, Patel, even Savarkar, everybody raised only one question. Mere change of religion, how can it disconnect you from your forefathers? In India, every day a new religion is born. You have Satya Sai, you have this, you have that. Many religions are born. Do they disconnect you from your past? Then how can you say that because we are professing two religions, we are not one people? On that question, of course, Nehru can be blamed for accepting the principle by agreeing to partition of the country. But then, in spirit, he always continued to raise this question even after partition. He went to Aligarh Muslim University and asked the students, I feel pride about what is India before 1947 for 2000 years. Do you also feel the same way? Is that spirit what influences you? A very pertinent question. So Rashtra denotes that spirit. Rashtra is not a physical entity, it's a spirit that permeates the society, sometimes subterranean. You may not express it, you may be very westernized, you may be something else, but there will be occasions when all that westernity will go once that spirit is awakened. Since there was a reference to Nehru, when Kamala Nehru died, the great atheist, Nehru claimed to be an atheist himself. The great atheist Nehru wanted her ashes to be immersed in Prayag, in Triveni Sangam. Why? Because that's the spirit, waking up. It's another matter of Nehru's death. Nehru's ashes were immersed in many rivers and all. So that is the spirit which keeps this nation one. Our constitution keeps us one as a political unit. Our culture, civilization keeps us one as an eternal society. That is what Rashtra means. That's what I refer to in this. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. I think we have about 15 minutes or so. I'll open it up for questions. I have lots of questions, but I know that you want to ask. Yeah?
Just to make the process smooth, if you want to introduce yourself, only your name, nothing more, and go straight to your question so we can get more questions in. They will decide who will ask the question.
So let's start with this lady here.
Hello, my name is Lavanya, and it's an honor speaking with you, sir. I've heard a lot of talks of yours, and in one of your interviews, you mentioned that our national leaders, their ideas, not ideology, the ideas evolve over time, and they articulate depending on that time. So, sir, I would like to understand the practical risks of those ideas that they thought was suitable at that point in time. For example, Gandhiji's version of non-violence. So his doctrine of offering another cheek. I mean, one could argue that it's one of the benign form of atrocities, but I can't help myself but wonder how it applied and impacted especially women who were, let's say, who were set out to, who had a man set out to dishonor them, to put it mildly.
Thank you, Lavanya. Point well taken.
Yeah, so what are your views?
Got it. Got it. Okay, so like products, ideas also have a shelf life. Please. Some ideas have less shelf life. Some ideas live for millennia. Society should have that power of discretion as to which ideas you need to hang on to, which need to be discarded. You know, we always quote Tennyson when he said, old order changeth, yielding place to the new, lest one good custom corrupted the whole world. I mean, what you thought as a good custom can corrupt your world after some time. You know, some ideas have to have place, time, relevance. Ahimsa has its own relevance. You have to practice ahimsa as a human being. Can a soldier on the border practice ahimsa? It has certain specific context, meanings and all. So ideas need to be always restated, reinterpreted. Society has to keep that kind of power of discretion. But this is not something Tennyson told us. In our ancient wisdom, it was stated very clearly. There is a sloka, starts with Tatasya Kupoya Miti Bruvanam. My grandfather has dug up my well. That's why, even if the water is bad, I will continue to drink. Do you do that? It's not because your grandfather dug it up. If that water is useful, you will use it. If not, you change it. You discard it. So ideas in our own system also it was stated that Purana Mityeva Nasadhu Sarvam. Just because something is ancient, it need not be very noble. Nasadhu Sarvam Navamitya Vajam. Just because something is new, something is looking very fanciful, it need not be very good. Santah Pariksha Nyatras Bandi. The wise man should have the power of discretion, will have the power of discretion. Fools just imitate. Mudaha paraprachene buddhi. You have to discuss some ideas. Ideas about women. In India, how to undergo a transformation, how to change. Because what we think as ideas today about women or womanhood are medieval ideas, not ancient ideas. The ancient Indian idea of womanhood is to be understood from personalities like Savitri, Sita, Draupadi, Damayanti. People like them should represent the idea of womanhood from a very Indian perspective, not the medieval concept where you said so many things. I mean, Tulsi's Ramayana says that Ahalya became a pathar, stone. Not original Tulsi Ramayana. Not original Ramayana. But medieval period, there was an interpretation. Yes, there was a sense of guilt in her mind, in her heart, that made her rock-like. She was shocked into something that she never intended. So there are interpretations depending on which times you lived. But should you interpret it the same way because somebody said in the 14th century? Societies should have that kind of power of discretion to always upgrade themselves, and that is the duty of the educated people in any society. That is the duty of the gurus in our society. Let me end by saying, in our system, Hinduism is the only, Hindu means Hindu pantheon of religions are the only religions which have the tradition of gurus. No other religion has it. Gurus are endowed with the power to interpret religion. Religion I'm using in the loose context, dharma. They have the power to interpret. In other religions it's not allowed. Whatever is stated by a book or a prophet has to be followed. You can't give your own interpretation, but you can in our system. Because we believe that knowledge, when it is transmitted from generation to generation, it has to be made applicable, relevant. That duty rests on our gurus. So we have a system, healthy system. Follow that. Whichever is to be discarded, we should discard it.
Thank you so much, sir. That reminds me, we call Sanatan. Sanatan, that is everlasting. But they'll always say Sanatan is that which is Nitya Nutan, which gets refurbished, rejuvenated, and refreshed as we go. Only then that lasts forever. The other thing I want to say is when sir mentioned learn about womanhood from Sita, Draupadi, Savitri, I will reinforce the point which he said, that go back to the original itihas. That's what I talk about. Valmiki Ramayana and Vedvyas Rachit Mahabharat. Because only then, don't depend on the fiction written on it. Fiction, padho, maje karo, entertain yourself, but don't depend on it to define what Indian womanhood was. Anyways, next question. The last one over there. Yeah.
So you mentioned that Hindutva is not an allergy, it's much more than that. I want to ask, is Hindutva inclusive of all religion, caste, gender, and sexual orientation? or does it limit a certain number of people or minorities?
Okay, if it limits itself to any other identity other than the one I said, that the inheritors of that great ancient wisdom of this country over millennia, if it tries to limit anything to anything other than that identity, it's not Hindutva.
So it should be inclusive of everyone.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Thank
you.
Next one.
May I ask?
Okay.
You talked about humanity, but we seem to have gone into this digital world where human beings have become artificial intelligence, and this government is moving towards the presumption that this artificiality can rule us. So may I know where you stand on us as having, blood, DNA, food, desire for hunger, etc., versus, our non-biological existence. Where do you stand?
Okay, you asked a very, very heavy question, but can I be light-hearted a little bit? Why are you so selfish that humans should remain forever? You were not there 300,000 years ago, It was chimpanzees, apes, which existed 300,000 years ago. We came into being only 300,000 years ago. Why is this belief that we should remain eternal? Maybe you should give way to somebody else, meta-humans. Now the serious part of it. Yes, it's a very big question. We have entered the era of technology which is going to completely revolutionize our basic existence itself. Meaning that until now, we lived under the belief that we are the masters of this universe because we are thinking beings. One faculty that we have better than all other creation, including animate and inanimate, was that we are better IQ fellows. We have better IQ. Today, you have machines that have much better IQ than you. That is what is artificial intelligence. In 1997, IBM, produced that first very, very powerful supercomputer. Supercomputers were invented in 1964, for that matter. Supercomputer means something which has a a connected system of computers, which have more processing power, more thinking power. But something that we did not imagine, in 97, IBM pitted that machine against Gary Kasparov. I know you all know Gary Kasparov, I'm sure. Gary Kasparov at that time was the world's leading chess champion. Chess is a mind game. In chess, you have to make moves, calculations so fast. There were 9 rounds of game between that IBM machine and Kasparov. Kasparov could only win 2. In 7 games, machine defeated Kasparov. That day, the world realized that we can create more intelligent machines than humans. And today, we reached a stage where you have super intelligent machines, going to dominate every walk of our life. That is what you are referring to as AI. What will happen to us? It's a big question. It's a big worry, I would say. But we are going on creating it. Going on doing it, like, the Biotechnology Association of the World has decided that you can do genetic experiments using artificial intelligence over plants, over potato, over cotton. You can create genetically modified cotton and all. But you should not do it on human beings. This was a decision they took in 1987. 4 years ago in China, 2 young biotechnology genetic engineering scientists, genome scientists, genetically manipulated the DNA configuration of a child in the womb, in embryo. And they produced a child who will be immune to 70 types of viruses. That child will not have cough, will not have cold, will not have fever, will not have stomachache, will not have headache, because no virus can impact it. It's another matter. China jailed those scientists for 3 years for going against the decision. But you created. So you are creating superhumans, meta-humans. So you are entering a different age, technology era. How do you handle it is a big challenge. I agree with you totally. And unfortunately, I also agree with you that there is not much thinking happening about what are the red lines. You know, technology evolves every time. In human history, technology always evolved. This is the first time it is happening. It always evolved. But when major technological upgradations happened, there was always an intervention by philosophers. Even I would quote Karl Marx. When heavy industrialization was happening in Europe, when Karl Marx stood up to ask this pertinent question that what will happen to the labor? Will they be exploited? Or will they get their rights? Right or wrong, his philosophy, communism is right or wrong is different. I don't disagree with his formulation or his prescription. But there was somebody standing up and asking questions. But when this AI revolution is taking place, there are no philosophers in sight intervening in this. We are allowing it to go on. But having said it, I will just share one information with you. In 2021, Vatican of all, the Catholic religious institution, it hosted a conference on artificial intelligence and limits of it. And it did not just call some monks, some fathers and bishops. It also called officials from IBM, officials from AMD. These leaders of today's artificial intelligence industry, they also called their priests, some other religious priests and all of them. And there they came out with something called the Rome Call for AI Ethics. And they coined a new word. Technology people will understand that word. It's called algorithms. At the base of everything is algorithm. You create an algorithm that creates the whole artificial intelligence framework. There you have to introduce the ethics. The guy who is building that algorithm should have ethics. So they propose algorithms. It's actually 6 points. Rome Call for AI Ethics, and it is today being discussed all over the world. They are trying to build a consensus on it. But what is important in that is, Pope sent a message. And it's a very simple message. He said, okay, AI is for the benefit of humans. That's what scientists say. It's good for us, efficiency, speed, it will give you all that. Fair enough. You use that, but make sure man is supreme. Human beings should be supreme is what Pope's message was. So when we talk about these new technologies, if you are too selfish, only you can say that my supremacy should be maintained, but I am not even saying that. I am saying maybe your time is over. In 100 years from now, meta-humans will take over. 40,000 years ago, Neanderthals disappeared because Homo sapiens took over. We are all Homo sapiens. From Homo sapiens, meta-humans will take over, don't worry. But until then, if you want to keep supremacy, keep it on a later note. Thank you.